Hello and welcome to a new episode of Adobe Creative Cloud TV. My name is Terry White. In this episode, I'm excited to show you a new update to Lightroom for mobile for iOS that is going to make photographers very, very happy. That's right. For the first time, thanks to iOS 10, the appropriate iOS device, and Lightroom 2.5 and higher for mobile, we can now capture in RAW. That's right. Before, all iPhone shots were limited to the camera that you had and shooting in JPEG. Now, for the first time, and at least exclusively today on launch day, in Lightroom for mobile, you'll be able to capture in JPEG or RAW via the DNG capture now built into the Adobe camera inside of Lightroom. So, we're going to check out how it works. I'm going to show you some examples of how to use it to capture. And then we'll, of course, show you some examples of why you would want to capture in DNG. So let's jump right in and take a look at the camera itself. Now, I've got my iPhone 6S Plus here, and I want to point out that this feature is available on the 6S series, so 6S, 6S Plus, the 7 series, which is coming out this week, the 7 and 7 Plus, and the iPad Pro 9.7-inch device. Now, why those particular ones? Why not the 6 Plus before that, or the iPad Pro 12-inch, or any of those? Because it requires the 12 megapixel camera. That's the one that Apple opened the doors for RAW capture. So the devices I mentioned all have that 12 megapixel camera. And then, of course, any future devices will have that camera or better. So it starts with the 6S and 6S Plus on up. I'm on a 6S Plus today, and I'm going to show you how it works. So I'm going to go to my Lightroom icon here, and I can get to the camera a couple of ways. One, I just want to point out that if you do have one of the devices and it has Force Touch, you can just press hard, and that will take you right into the capture capabilities. So I can go take a photo, take a selfie, which will just launch Lightroom, switch to the camera, and switch it back to me, or edit the last photo. So if I go take a photo, that will go in and go right to the camera, and I can jump right in and start capturing. Now, before I do that, I want to point out that had I just gone in the old-fashioned way of just launching Lightroom, and right now I'm actually in a collection, if you switch to a collection first, when you bring up the camera, you're actually able to capture your photos into that collection. So that way you know exactly where they are when they get to the desktop. They'll be in the collection you capture them into. I love that feature. I use it all the time. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just bring up the camera again. And the big difference here, this looks exactly like the Lightroom camera before it, or the Adobe camera before it, but you'll notice at the top, it says DNG, and that's actually a toggle. If I tap on it, it'll bring up the controls to switch file format. So I can either switch to JPEG or DNG, leave it on DNG. Now there's a little explanation that to choose between the file formats, and that DNGs will of course take up more space because you are now shooting in RAW, taking complete advantage of that 12 megapixel camera. So in honor of Star Trek 50th anniversary, I've got my replica Star Trek communicator. Maybe it's not a replica, maybe it is the real thing. But I've got my Star Trek communicator here, and I can of course jump out of the file format, tap to focus. I can capture this in DNG. And if I move this little cable out of my way, the cable wants to be in the way. Move the cable out of the way. I can also tap at any point, switch back to JPEG, and capture my photos in JPEG. So at any given time, you're in charge of what file format you're capturing in. Now, because I'm capturing those to this collection, they will be added to the collection in just a second here. There they are. And of course, because I'm syncing back to the desktop as a Creative Cloud member, those two images, both the JPEG in their full 12 megapixel glory and the DNG in its full 12 megapixel glory, will be synced back to my desktop and all my other devices running Lightroom. So now, while we're not going to really wait for that to finish, what we're going to do is jump back to the computer for a second, where I've got, matter of fact, I've got them here on the phone. These two shots that I took outside today, these are two photos that I want to work with, but I'm going to go ahead and work with them on the computer just because it's a little bit bigger. I can work with them in either place. The same adjustments will apply across the board. I've got the this first image up. I stepped outside this morning at 9:29 and took this photo. And I shot it both ways. I shot it as a JPEG, and I shot it as a DNG file, captured it as DNG. Now, there's a slight difference. The clouds, of course, are moving between the shots. And, of course, I was on a monopod, so it's not a perfect match overlay, but there's a slight movement. Other than that, same shots taken within seconds of each other. All right, so if we go to the JPEG or the DNG, you'll notice in the cloud area, it's kind of blown out. That's because I metered on the houses themselves to kind of keep the shadow detail. And if we go back to the JPEG, in the past, you could have gone up to your highlight warning. You could see all that area is completely blown out, lacking detail. And if you were to try and bring that back in, you could grab the highlight slider and drag it down, and your warning goes away, which means it's no longer nothing. It's just white now. But if I pull it all the way down, I don't really get my clouds back. I just get, white. And if I go to the DNG and do the exact same thing, highlights blown out in the same way, but I pull the highlight slider down on the raw file, I actually get the detail that was captured by the sensor, that was lost in the JPEG, but preserved in the raw file. This is why, as photographers, we've shot in RAW for years, to get the best possible image from our cameras, to really take advantage of the sensor that we paid all that money for. So now we've got more detail here, and if I were really going to take this up a notch, you know what I'd do? I'd head down to my effects panel, and I would just give it a little bit of dehaze to just dehaze that image and bring that sky in even more. Now, if I were to go to the JPEG and do the exact same dehaze, I'm going to get some clouds, but I'm still not going to get any detail. It's making it look even worse. I'm just not going to get any detail in that JPEG. So let's just undo that. So we want to keep working with the RAW file. Now, there's one more advantage to working with the RAW versus the JPEG, and it's been the advantage from day one. We have the ability, since it's a RAW file, the white balance was not locked in by the camera. So I can either leave it as shot, or I can choose between auto, daylight, cloudy, so forth and so on. So I could try daylight, see what daylight looks like, makes it a little warmer. I can try cloudy, see what cloudy looks like, see if I like that better. Makes it even warmer yet. So I can play around with these different white balance settings. I can try auto even to see what that would do. I think I actually prefer either daylight or as shot. Yeah, I like daylight best. But I had the ability to play. I had the ability to choose. If we go back to the JPEG, there is no choice because it was locked in as a JPEG, as it always is as a JPEG. You get what you get. So that is the other advantage to being able to shoot or capture in RAW. You're going to have more detail, more dynamic range, and just a better overall image based on your camera. All right, so let me give you another example here. This is also shot in JPEG. This one's also shot in RAW. And in this one, the JPEG looks pretty good. Zoomed out, I got to hand it to you. I'd be okay with this shot. But if we zoom in, especially around the edges, we can see where they're kind of blended in, especially if you look back at the chair behind it there, how the edges, the artifacts as we call them, JPEG compression artifacts are more prevalent here. Now, on the RAW file, since it is RAW, there's going to be a little more noise, but there's no compression artifacts. This is sharp, detailed image that I have the ability now to go in and correct any way that I want because I've captured all the data that I can capture with this particular camera. So another advantage to shooting in RAW, and the best part is, starting today, you do your free update to Lightroom 2.5 for mobile, you do your free update to iOS 10, and if you're a 6S on up user, you've got a better capture system, capture mechanism right out of the bat. And I want to point out also today that while I'm doing this video, there are blog posts on Lightroom Journal and Scott Kelby's Lightroom Killer Tips that will go into even more detail about what's possible now. But I wanted to focus on the RAW capture because I think it's important, especially for the photographers out there that are now going to be able to take their iOS devices into situations where they just would have given up and reached in their bag for a better camera. Now you don't necessarily have to reach in your bag for that better camera because you've got the ability to capture in RAW. And it gets even better with the iPhone 7 that's coming out because we'll have two cameras on the 7 Plus and the ability to even capture more dynamic range, and better quality and telephoto and the whole 9 yards. So I'm excited, as you can tell, about this update, and I can't wait to take it out in the field and do more with it. And now I won't feel as bad as if I go somewhere and the only camera I have with me is the one in my pocket, my iPhone. So with that, take care, and we'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.